Okay, in this video, we're going to take a look at DTP, Dynamic Trunking Protocol, just an introduction. So Ethernet switches, typically their ports are usually access ports, meaning they're not going to trunk. They're used to connect to end devices, or trunking, connecting to another switch and carrying VLAN information. Let's take a look at what we mean by trunking here. Just a little review of 802.1q trunking. So here you can see that switch 1, let's say it receives a ARP request, which is a broadcast, on a switch port that belongs to VLAN 20. Okay, so the port on switch 1 belongs to VLAN 20. Because it's a VLAN, it's going to send, because it is a broadcast, it's going to send that broadcast out all ports belonging to VLAN 20. In this case, a trunk link that has VLAN 20 as one of the VLANs carried across this trunk link. All right, well, what switch 1 will do is send this frame out to switch 2, but before doing so, we'll insert a tag. And that tag will include a VLAN ID of 20. Switch 2 will receive this tagged frame, this ARP request, this broadcast. It will notice that the VLAN ID is for VLAN 20. So it will then remove the tag information. So the tag is removed by switch 2, and then it will send this Ethernet frame that came in for VLAN 20 out any ports that are configured for VLAN 20. In this case, Ethernet 02, which its port is configured for VLAN 20. Okay. All right, so access ports. Before we get into DTP, just a reminder that that end devices that connect to switch ports, those switch ports should be configured as an access port. We do that in interface mode with switch port mode access. That ensures that that port will never become a trunk link. Dynamic trunking protocol. This is a Cisco proprietary protocol, and most Cisco switches have this enabled by default on their switch ports. It operates in a point-to-point basis only between other switches, and it's designed to make interconnecting switches and carrying VLAN information over trunk links a little easier. An early step towards automation. Some people like DTP, having stuff done for them automatically. Others don't really care for this feature, and we'll see how they do it in just a moment. All right, so let's take a look here. Okay, DTP, trunking modes. Okay, so the key here is the two ends of the link, the two switches. Okay. You have switch A here and switch B here. If you want them to trunk, then they're going to have a configuration that has trunk. Okay, the most obvious is you say trunk here, you say trunk here in the configuration. We'll show that in a moment, and it trunks. Okay, if you don't want them to trunk, you configure that port as an access port here and an access port on B, and it's going to do access. All right, but there's other options as well. Personally, I am one of those that say if I want a trunk, I'm going to configure trunk on both ends. No negotiation. I should know what I want to do with my switches. If I don't want them to trunk, I'm going to configure access on both ends. All right, let's take a look here at the, here we go. Let's take a look at how to configure this. So on the interface, you'd say switch port mode, and if I do a question mark, notice I have three options. Access, dynamic, trunk. Okay, but wait a minute, I have four options. Well, that's because two of those options begin with dynamic. Dynamic auto and dynamic desirable. So if I say dynamic mode or switch port mode dynamic question mark, notice I get two additional options, auto or desirable. Okay, so switch port mode and my different options. What do they do for me? Access permanently puts that switch port in non-trunking mode. Okay, it negotiates, so it does send DTP frames, but negotiates saying, "Hey, I'm an access port, so I want to do access." Trunk puts the interface in permanent trunking mode, okay, and negotiates it to convert the link to a trunk link. Non-negotiate says, I'm permanent trunking mode, and I'm not going to send any DTP frames. Dynamic desirable says, I'm going to actively attempt to be a trunk, okay, if you want to be. And dynamic auto says, yeah, I want to be if you want to be. All right, these look a little confusing, but let's go ahead and take a look at the chart here. Okay, notice that if I have access, that no matter what the choice is at the other end, it's going to be access. If the other, so I'm going to put access here too. But what if the other end says, no, I'm insisting upon trunking? Okay, don't do that. Then you're going to kind of have limited connectivity. You're going to have issues. If you do access on the other side. If you do trunk on the other side. Okay, as far as some of these others, let's take a look, for example, at dynamic auto. Okay, dynamic auto, if we're both kind of not sure, we're willing, but we're not sure, we're going to be access. If one end is dynamic auto, the other end is dynamic desirable, then we're going to do trunk. I kind of look at these, let me kind of refresh this here. Not to belabor the point, but I kind of look at this as dynamic auto is the switch port that says, if you're trying to ask somebody, where do you want to go for dinner? Dynamic auto is one of those that I don't care, where do you want to go? Well, if you're both dynamic auto, I don't care, where do you want to go? I don't care, where do you want to go? You're not going to go to dinner, okay? Somebody has to make a decision, and that's the job of dynamic desirable. That's kind of how I look at these. Again, I prefer set it to trunk on both ends or set it to access on both ends. That's my personal opinion, my personal view. Okay, so here we do show interfaces. So let's take a look at what happens by default. So show interfaces, fast Ethernet 021. Let's say this is a switch that has it is by default, that port is set to dynamic auto. Let's say the other end is also set by default to dynamic auto, or it's been configured as that. You have to, that's something you need to make sure when you, on your Cisco switches, make sure you know what the default is. Again, I set it to trunk or access, and that way I don't have to worry about what I'm connecting. I should know. All right. So the operational mode is static access. So what does this mean? Dynamic auto is how the port was configured, or could be the default on some switches. If we have dynamic auto at both ends, as we do in this case, then we see that the switch is operating in access mode. Okay, but you'll notice that the negotiation of trunk is on. It is sending those DTP frames. All right, I hope this helped with a little introduction to DTP.